Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here, let's talk boxing. I've already uploaded one video tonight, a review of the fantastically exciting and controversial victory of Leigh Wood over Josh Warrington. We talk about that stoppage, was it premature, was it not? We also get technical and discuss how the fight played out the way it did. So please check out that video, leave your comment section in the comments section down below. Now, in terms of this particular video, I want to talk about Gilberto ZURDO Ramirez and how he might fare against some of the top cruiserweights in the world, because he's just fought Joe Smith Jr., the two former light heavyweight kings squared off at cruiserweight, and it was Ramirez that won the fight on points after a really good and disciplined, quite slick at times, boxing performance, something you don't associate with him, against Joe Smith. This comes after linking up with Malik Scott, so we're starting to see the influence of the tutelage of Malik Scott. But how would he cope against some of the best cruiserweights in the world today? This was a WBA eliminator, so props to both men who lobbied the governing body to get into a position where B status guys can fight each other. It was WBA number 7 versus the WBA number 8. The WBA champion is ARSEN GOULIMIRIAN. How would Ramirez cope against him? If he doesn't go down the route of Goulimirian and he seeks to get a title shot against BILLAM SMITH or BADOU JACK or JAIME, how could he cope against them? What if he's forced into a final eliminator? What if he comes up against one of the British contingent, RIAKPORHE, OKOLIE, perhaps? How would he cope? Is there future success here for Ramirez, who hopes to become a world title holder at cruiserweight? We're also going to talk a little bit about BEKTIMIR MELEKUZIEV, the bully, the man who many people felt could be a future champion at super middleweight before he ran into Gabriel Rosado. He ended up being overly aggressive. He walked onto a big shot. He got stopped. He's rebuilt since then, and he's gone on 6 consecutive victories, including a revenge victory over Gabriel Rosado, and last night a victory against ALANTEZ Fox. I say last night. I don't know why I'm saying last night. I literally watched the fight like an hour ago. I'm probably saying last night because by the time most of you watch it, it would have been last night. But he stopped him in round 4, so we're going to talk about that. And has he actually learned anything? Is he capable of beating some of the top super middleweights in the world? Well, let's start off talking about Gilberto Ramirez. You know, when the fight was about to start, I put out a tweet to say Joe Smith has to put it on ZURDO. He has to get close, he has to rip that body, he has to trust his durability. If he sits off, he'll lose. And in the first round, you saw that's exactly what he did. And he was ripping that body. He was landing some nice body shots. But at range, it was ZURDO Ramirez getting the full rotation of those long limbs, able to land on him consistently. So it was a swing round. The pattern was exactly as I expected, and I felt that round went to ZURDO. Then from there, the next couple of rounds were not close. Ramirez started to drop that backhand into the body. He was using the jab really well to distract Joe Smith before launching that long straight shot to the solar plexus. And you just saw that Joe was almost content with being at range. There was no feinting, no level change. He wasn't trying to force his way in behind a high guard. He was almost content with being at range. And I was saying on Twitter, he's fighting the completely wrong fight here. ZURDO is controlling the range. He looks very, very comfortable. And you could see some nice movement as well. You could see the Malik Scott influence. The one thing that at times stood out to me is that when he would often move to his own left in these early stages, he would sometimes come in line with the backhand of Joe Smith. He wasn't moving out diagonally enough to understand the distance there, but Joe still wasn't trying to launch forward to close that range and throw the right hand, so he was comfortable. In the 4th round, it's a much better round from Smith. He used a little trick that he often does. He threw the right hook and his back leg came across, so he squared up, and by doing that, it's called a shift. He shifted and closed the range, and he hid his chin behind the lead shoulder of ZURDO, and from there he's disguised a little left hook over the top of that shoulder. It was a really nice way to start the combination of getting in the pocket, and then he started to work from there. But it was that one moment, really, that one combination where he had some success. By and large, it was Ramirez that was controlling the round, but the solid looking shots, the more perhaps clean and effective power punching came from Joe Smith. Depends what you preferred. I liked Smith's work in that round, but the next couple of rounds, the 6th and the 7th, ZURDO started to get a swagger to his game. He actually even started to show some upper body movement. And even when Joe Smith was getting the lead foot positioning, one of the things that became apparent is because of the reach advantage of Ramirez and using that jab very, very well, he would line up Joe with the jab hand and he'd lean back so that the backhand of Joe Smith's was too far away. So he'd get the outside positioning but not get it deep enough. So Ramirez could still reach him. Joe couldn't reach him with the backhand, and it was Ramirez that was dictating the distance control. And against this rangier southpaw, he didn't really seem like he knew what he was doing, Joe Smith. And Sergio Mora was comparing him to Maxim Vlasov and saying, look, Joe Smith's faced a guy like this before. He should know how to deal with it. The thing is with Vlasov, sometimes he'd lean that weight onto that front foot. So he puts that weight on that front foot and he's letting go of fluid combinations. He's planting. He'll finish his work, then he moves. With Ramirez, he's not looking to hold his feet and plant. He was looking to literally lean back and get away. So it was different. It was easier to close the range against Vlasov, even though I thought Vlasov beat Joe Smith Jr. anyway, right? But that's neither here nor there. The point is, stylistically, he was struggling here. But he did make an adjustment. And in round 7, he started to do something that actually Malik Scott had been advising Ramirez to do. Ramirez had said to him, I want you to start punching the gaps, the air. In other words, I don't want him to just have empty space to be able to walk in on you. Just throw an empty jab. Doesn't have to be anything on it. Just keep the jab pumping so that there's nothing there for him there's no space for him to just walk through. He has to think about what he's going to do. Well, it was actually Joe Smith that started to throw throwaway shots. He started to throw a 2-1 to jump in, or even 1-2-1, and he's just throwing these loose shots. There's nothing on them. There's nothing on them. He's literally doing it to be able to close the range. And it made Ramirez tentative, and it made him just move backwards without throwing anything back, without wanting to commit. And he was able to win a couple of those rounds, and Ramirez was looking tired. And you're thinking, oh, are we seeing a changing of the tide here? But then you saw a really nice adjustment from Ramirez, and it wasn't something that Malik Scott told him to do. So you saw some nice thinking stuff in there, because he decided, right, I'm going to stop running away. I'm going to hold my feet now. I've been moving. I've had a lot of success like that. Now it's time to hold my feet. He did hold his feet. He ripped some nice body shots. He actually slowed down and hurt Joe Smith to the body in that final round as well. So the adjustment he made in rounds 9 and 10, when it appeared as though the tide was changing, in my opinion, won him the fight 7 rounds to 3. The judges had it 9 rounds to 1, far too wide, but at least the right man got the job done. How does he cope against some of the top cruiserweights in the world? Well, one thing became apparent, and that is that even up close against the former light heavyweight in Joe Smith Jr., Ramirez, despite his size, does not appear to be that physically strong. From a technical perspective, he doesn't know how to tie up. He really needs to start working on that clinch game. Go to some, I don't know, shoot fighters, some wrestling trainers if you have to, or a old school boxing trainer that understands inside fighting. Bring someone in alongside Malik Scott. Because to me, it's clear he doesn't know how to use his mass, and he's never known how to use his mass effectively. And the problem that he's got against a guy like ARSEN GOULIMIRIAN, he's not the fastest footed of guys, and he can be a little bit square on when he throws his punches. So with the movement, Ramirez can potentially have some real success and make him look a little bit slow at times. The problem that he's got is that Goulimirian's got some really good short power, and he knows how to use it. And he doesn't have to load up, and he really turns those knuckles over. So if he's able, with this big muscular mass, force you onto the back ropes, cut off the ring on you, force his way in, then let go of short shots, you might not get away with what you got away with tonight against Joe Smith. You know, he fought a southpaw Goulimirian in his last fight, I believe it was, against Constantine Bejanaru, a Moldovan or Romanian southpaw. I think he's Moldovan. And there was one point, if you go and check out that knockout or the knockdown, the final shot, you'll see that Goulimirian's actually in a position up against the southpaw where he's got his lead foot on the inside of the foot of Bejanaru. So Bejanaru has the positional advantage. But he's not looking to throw a jab or a backhand. He shortens up this really nice little left hook. Okay, so he's in a position, right, where the jab hand is the one that's in line with his face. From there, he can throw a jab, he can throw a backhand, but he's reaching across because he doesn't have the inside angle. So he shortens up this little left hook, very short, and go and look at the power on that shot. These are the things that he's going to have to be very careful of. But he might look at Goulimirian and say, I might have a foot speed advantage, and that's why I think it's very astute that he's brought in Malik Scott. Against guys like Lawrence Okolie, they will look at him and they'll say, if I can get close, I can maul this guy. Now the question is, how does Lawrence Okolie's career go from here in terms of what he's going to be allowed to do? I've got a feeling you're going to start seeing referees clamp down a lot more on him holding now. But if it's not excessive, he can be destructive on the inside, and he could potentially start beating up Gilberto Ramirez. Even at range, it's not necessarily a mismatch there, but up close, it could be a real physical mismatch. And the same thing would apply with BILLAM SMITH, potentially, who's a very good inside fighter. Smith is not a huge cruiserweight, though. And at range, sometimes he can be touched. So who knows if Ramirez will look at that and fancy his chances. He might also fancy his chances against BADOU Jack, who's a really good mover. And he can switch it up and get inside too, and he's going to struggle, I believe, Ramirez, to be able to deal with the foot adjustments of BADOU JACK. But if he can keep it long and use his range to an advantage and rip the body of the older man, he might fancy his chances there too. He needs to stay away from JAIME. He'll get lit up like a Christmas tree. The punchers, like I said, OKOLIE, RIAKPORHE, these sorts of guys, you've got to be very careful of their long power. So I don't think he beats everybody. I don't think you're going to see a new king of the cruiserweight division. But if he's matched correctly, I could potentially see how he'd be involved in a couple of fights where he could get a result against one or two of these top level guys at cruiserweight. Let me know what you think about his future. In terms of Joe Smith Jr., where does he go from here? There was a lot of talk about him fighting Anthony Yarde potentially. Tonight he made it clear that he will be staying at cruiserweight. I don't think there's a need for Anthony Yarde to go up to cruiserweight just yet, so I can't see that happening. It's going to be a long road back for Joe Smith Jr. in my humble opinion. We'll see how that plays out. With regards to BEKTIMIR MELEKUZIEV, listen, this guy is great to watch. 10 knockouts from 13 victories. He has that one stoppage defeat at the hands of Gabriel Rosado. But here's the thing with MELEKUZIEV, right? He rips that body and he's a real bully. He's so aggressive with it and really launches it in there, punches, aims for the liver through that solar plexus. He's looking to cut you in half. And it's very, very exciting to watch. The problem that he has is that he's still not defensively responsible, in my opinion. Fox was landing that jab consistently tonight. And Fox is a guy who did go the distance against Eric Bazimrian, the undefeated fighter from Canada. I think he's Armenian origin. He also got knocked out in 4 rounds by David Morrell. So he's matched that. Prior to that, many of you might remember him from being stopped by Liam Williams inside 5 rounds a few years ago. And in the past, he had gone the distance with Demetrius Andrade. So he's a guy, whenever he steps up, he falls short. But he really did do a number on him. And every time he was touching him, he was hurting him. And I think a lot of people are focusing on that aspect. But don't focus on just that. Also look at how many shots of Fox's were landing on MELEKUZIEV. He just does not get his head off the line. He does not, for a southpaw, think about positional advantageous positions with his feet. He literally just looks to come in the front door and start banging away at that body. And whilst he's very, very good from a physical perspective, there are a lot of errors there where good technical fighters that can bang will be looking at this and saying, you know what, we're going to line him up. We're going to expose him just like Gabriel Rosado did. And there is one day a brutal knockout waiting to happen unless he starts becoming more responsible defensively. Now, Easy Raw Boxing, shout out to EZ, he actually said that he would like to see him fight Jaime Munguia. Now that would be a fight I'd be really interested in seeing, because you're talking about two very aggressive, physically strong, heavy-handed men who have flaws to their game. That's going to be all action stuff, right? That's going to be fireworks. So sign me up for that one. I'm down for it. We'll leave it for a technical breakdown as to who would win that fight if it's ever happening, but I'm happy to see that. He's got the physicality to be able to create some really fun fights with a lot of guys. John Ryder, that would be a terrific fight. But some of those guys in there, the David Morrells of the world, the Canelo Alvarez's of the world, the guys that are really guys with a high IQ that can line you up with a big power shot, he's got a lot of work to do before he comes up against those guys. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents, of all that we've spoken about. Don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.